Welcome to Crimepedia podcast. It's nice to have you on board. My name's Cherry. I'm your host this week. And with me, as always, is my partner in crime. It's Morgan.
Hello, Cherry.
Hello. So we've got a fun episode for you this week. I'm trying to find an episode from St. Paul's because we just come back from CrimeCon and CrimeCon is in St. Paul's in London. I thought it'd be really cool to do an unsolved case from St. Paul's. So I did a little bit of research and all of the cases that I could find from St. Paul's were solved. So couldn't do that. So instead, I found a case that is from St. Paul's Road in London.
All
so
right.
You know where I was going with that one. I tried to collate it in, but you know. So so we got a nice London one this week, an unsolved one from 1907.
Ooh, you love the old ones.
I do. I love the old ones. I love them particularly. At CrimeCon, there was a lady that did a talk, and she is a historian, a true crime historian, and she's calls herself like a historic detective. And she goes back and looks for survivors of people that were, involved in murders and crimes and stuff like that. And she's got this whole like library. Actually, her crime conversation is on the CrimeCon UK's Crime Conversations podcast at the moment with David Swindle. I think she's called Gemma. She's a really, really interesting lady. And she's got this huge library in her house of artifacts from actual crime scenes. She's got loads of different stuff. It's really, really interesting, the stuff that she's got. And she does a lot of historical cases, and she is like one of the first people to find a victim's resting place and things like that. She's a really interesting lady. So if you want to check her out, go and have a look at the Crime Conversations podcast and you'll hear all about it. She's on with David Swindle. She might be called Lindsay, possibly. I can't remember. But she's
something
great.
Like that.
Yeah, something like that. But she looks really good. So anything we need to talk about before we get into this week's case?
Well, you do have CrimeCon Scotland coming up here in just a few months.
Yeah, in September the 10th, we're going to be at the Glasgow Hilton for CrimeCon Scotland. That will be good fun. We're going to be exhibiting just like at the London one, just like at the US one. So you can come along and meet all your favourite podcasters, meet lots of different speakers. I think there's going to be a lot of speakers there. I think Nazir Afzal's going to be there again. Colin Sutton's going to be there again. Mark Williams-Thomas is going to be there. So there's quite a lot of people to meet. David Swindle will be there. So there's a lot of people to come along and meet. There's also, they're focusing on some Scottish cases, I believe. So I think some of the speakers are doing Scottish cases, which would be quite interesting. Because probably will be cases that you don't generally hear about here, and the same in the US. So we'll try and get as much of that covered back, and I'll do some lives with you on Instagram and we can do those together, which will be quite good fun.
That sounds good.
Yeah. So I'm going to apologise now in advance for my croaky voice. I'm suffering with hay fever a little bit this week and struggling a little bit. So I do apologise for my wispy breathing and my horrible, weird voice. So there's nothing I can do about it, unfortunately. You might want to fast forward to next week's episode instead.
No. It's going to be great.
There'll be some pregnant pauses whilst I'm coughing away from my microphone. Right. Are you ready?
I am ready. Let's do this.
Let's go. On Friday 13th of September 1907, the Daily Mail reported the discovery of the naked body of a young woman in the bedroom of her flat in Camden Town. She had been brutally murdered. Her throat had been cut from ear to ear, almost to the point of decapitation. A number of items of value are missing, including her wedding ring, but there were other valuable items in her home that were left behind. This is Crimepedia, and this is the Postcard Murder. Okay, so Emily Elizabeth Shaw, previously Dimmock. So she was previously Emily Dimmock, but she's known around her area as Phyllis. But for non-confusing ways, I'm just going to call her Emily throughout this whole thing because it gets really confusing with the different names. Now, she originally came from Hitchin and had moved to Luton in Bedfordshire, where she worked in a hat factory. She had travelled quite a lot, which is a bit different for those times. She'd lived in several addresses in London and Manchester. And in the census of 1881, it shows the Dimmock family living in Lambeth in South London. Then moving to Surrey. The father, a guy called William, is recorded as being a photographic artist from Bermondsey in London. And the mum, Sarah, was from Great Hadlam in Hertfordshire, which is about a mile or so from Standon. There was an elder brother called William, and there was a sister called Esther Elizabeth. So you've got 3 kids, mum and dad. Now, Emily was once employed as a housemaid. She was employed with a family in Finchley and was known as very happy, very merry, good-natured, really, really nice girl. Now, in September 1907, she lived in a flat in Camden in London at 29 St Paul's Road. See what I did there? St Paul's Road?
Yeah.
Which had been, now since it's actually been renamed. It's now renamed is called Agar Grove. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. AGAR. I'm sure you'll tell me if I'm not. It was a particularly scandalous time though, because she had been living with a man called Bertram Shaw for around 8 months, but they weren't actually married. Now, the backstory to this is she was 23, he was 19. And in those days, he would have had to have his parents' consent to get married. And his mum wasn't a big fan of Emily's. So she wouldn't have given her permission for him to marry. So they lived together as a married couple, but weren't actually married. So this obviously is quite scandalous. The other scandalous thing is that he was an attendant on the Midland Railway. He was a cook in the catering car on this railway, and she was a housewife. But when he went to work, she worked part-time as a sex worker. She really liked the pub life. She really liked the going out kind of thing, apparently, and she could earn money by entertaining men back at her flat. Now, they lived in a they lived in a house where they had a landlady, and the house was kind of divided up. So they had part of the house and she had part of the house. They had 2 rooms, I believe, on the bottom floor of this house. So on the 12th of September 1907, Bert returned home from a journey that he had had to Sheffield. When he got home, the flat was locked. So this was really strange. I don't know why he didn't have his own key, but he got a key from the landlady and opened the door to, I think they called it the parlour then, that was their room. And he discovered Emily naked on the bed with her throat cut from ear to ear. This is a particularly gruesome crime, and I am going to go into quite graphic detail of what happened, because it's you need to kind of know it to understand what was happening in the room at the time. So if you don't like that kind of thing, you might want to fast forward it. I will give you a warning just before I go into it, so you can sort of skip 30 seconds if you want to. So Emily was found on the bed, and Bert discovered a postcard album. Now, this is something that she collected. She collected postcards, and it was usually kept in their living room. But this postcard album was lying in the bedroom with some of the postcards pulled out and thrown all over the floor, which is a bit weird. A friend of Emily's had said that some months before she had received a threatening postcard with a postmark from a seaside town. And the postcard read, "Do not be surprised if you hear of a murder being done. You've ruined my life and I may do it soon." There's not really much else said about this postcard, only that she had this threatening postcard sent to her. So the Shaw's landlady said that she only knew them as Mr. and Mrs. Shaw, and that they had been living with her for about 9 weeks, and they had 2 rooms on the ground floor, and they paid a rent of 8 shillings a week. I don't even know what that is in now money, to be honest.
Sounds like nothing to me.
Yeah, I think it was quite cheap rent for now, but probably back then it was quite expensive. So she said that on the 11th of September, she was at home in both the afternoon and the evening. She saw Emily's partner Bert leave as usual, as he did around 4:30, at which time Emily was alone in the house. She was washing clothes and linen in the wash house, which was in the yard at the back of the house. She was out there till about 8 p.m. And the landlady said she noticed that Emily had a brown velvet skirt on and a light coloured blouse. She said also that she had her hair in curling pins all around the forehead. They were all pinned in. The last time she saw her that evening was around 8 o'clock. She said that at about 20 past 8, she heard the front door shut and presumed that was Emily leaving. She went to bed that night at around 5 to 11, and by that time had heard no sounds of anyone coming in and out of the house. She said the next morning she woke up at about 8 a.m. saying that she normally would knock on Emily's door as she was like going around her business. But
Mhm.
she did knock on the door at 9 a.m. but got no answer. So she thought, oh, Emily's probably left already. Now, she did corroborate Bert's story, saying that he came home around the usual time, about 20 past 11, and that she was present when he tried the door. She got the key for him and she went into the room. When he opened the door, she saw that the drawers of the chest were all piled up and then there was some on the floor. She said that Bert forced open the folding doors and went into the bedroom, and then she saw the body of Emily lying on the bed with a lot of blood. She went back to her kitchen and then afterwards the police came. So, according to the Unsolved Murders website, which is a really good resource for this, they document that a divisional surgeon was called to 29 St Paul's Road. Now, he, on arrival, went to the bedroom on the ground floor. He says that he sees a heap of clothes, first of all, adding that the bed was in disarray. There was clothes thrown everywhere, and he saw the nude figure of Emily. He said that the bedclothes were saturated in blood, and there was a stream of blood on the floor reaching to within a foot of the bed. So this is your trigger warning. This is the part where we talk about the post-mortem and the actual injury. So if you don't want to listen, just go on 30 seconds.
Can I go 30 seconds ahead?
Yeah, you can.
Okay,
just come
excellent.
back. So he said that the blood had gone all the way through the bed and that the cut to her throat was reaching from about 3/4 of an inch from the lobe of the left ear, really, really deep, cutting through the arteries, the veins and the nerves on that side, going towards the right side. Now it cut through the windpipe and separated everything down to the vertebrae. Her head was almost severed from the trunk and was only held in position by the muscles at the back of the neck. So this is an absolutely horrific injury.
And what we're usually told about injuries or murders like this is there's anger involved.
Yes, personal.
A lot of anger.
Yeah.
Yes, very personal, and someone's very, very angry about something.
Yes, definitely. So he formed the opinion that the wound must have been caused by a very sharp instrument used with very determined force, which I think is a crime of passion. To me, straight away, this signifies, like you said, somebody who's very personal, somebody who's got a massive problem, and that this, I would say is maybe a sexual or a romantically fueled anger. He said death would have been instant and it was quite impossible that such a wound would have been self-inflicted. So we know that this was definitely a murder. This is not something she would have done herself. And if you read through the post-mortem report that he writes, I won't read the whole thing because it takes ages. He believes that her head would have been pulled up. And I'll explain now how they actually found her. So the temperature of her body at the time of being found was quite cold. And judging from the rigor mortis, he believed that she was dead for several hours. He did a post-mortem examination and, amongst other things, examined the contents of her stomach. Now, she is said to have eaten supper, and there was indications of 2 places being laid at a table in their apartment, in their flat, so a dinner for 2 people. So she obviously had someone there at some point to eat. He said that when he examined her stomach, there were indications of mint, which he thinks was from a mint source, potatoes, bread. The stage in which the digestion had reached indicated that the meal had taken about 3.5 hours through digestion prior to her death.
That is, wow. That's really specific.
It is quite specific. So he then said that she had drank something that was quite dark, which he thought was probably a stout. So I thought that was quite interesting. He can tell like what kind of drink she's had from looking at her stomach contents. But I guess, you probably can. So when he saw Emily, he said she was lying on her left side and her right arm was lying on the pillow within about 8 or 9 inches of her head. Her left arm was lying across her back, which was covered in blood, and there was clots on the pillow and on her back. He says that this was suggestive of a way of naturally sleeping. So she had her arm up, her arm was up under her head and the other arm was across her back. So it was like she was naturally like asleep. He said that the position of her left arm was not a natural position. And so he believed that the killer had repositioned her left arm after he had killed her. her legs were like not exactly fetal position, but they were pulled sort of up a little bit. So it did look like she was asleep.
Was asleep. Yeah. Which would tell me that, well, I mean, I don't know if this is a big assumption on my part, but it almost sounds like whoever she was having dinner with was staying the night.
Yes.
And that they were almost like they were like in like a culling position.
Yes.
You know?
Very, very good. He said it was his opinion that the assailant was at the back of her, between her and the wall. So like snuggled up in like a big spoon, little spoon position. So that was very interesting. He was saying that later in the autopsy report, he believes that the person would have reached forward, pulled her hair and pulled her head back to expose her neck completely, because when they looked at the injury, the cut from one side was a lot deeper and a lot wider than the cut when it got closer to the bed, which makes sense because if you think about it, if you're pulling somebody's head up, when you get round from the left side round to the right, that right side is going to be touching the bed, so it's going to make it difficult to get a knife round in that kind of, in that the same compression the whole way around.
Now, I don't want to say this jokingly or anything.
Okay.
This is just honest opinion.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the injuries and how her head was pulled back, it really sounds like O.J. Simpson, Nicole Brown Simpson.
Yeah. No,
this is what I keep thinking of.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It is quite similar. Yeah. It's a horrible, I mean, it's an awful death, instant death, thankfully, but horrendous.
But you know what's confusing about this though, because of how horrendous it is.
Yeah.
And how violent it is.
Yeah.
It does not add up to someone who is cordially invited to the house, having dinner.
Yeah.
Someone who is in bed with the victim, someone who is cuddling
asleep
with the
asleep. Yeah.
Because it doesn't.
I mean, how often do sex workers sleep with their guests? I don't think they actually sleep, do they? They do the business and then the business is over.
Well, yeah, and they don't sit there and have supper with them either.
Well, I don't know. They might. I mean, if they paid for that,
I suppose. But I mean, I don't think it's.
I don't think they sleep, do they?
No, I don't think it's that'd be commonplace.
No,
and especially like that, it just seems like there's some sort of familiarity.
Yes, I agree.
Between the victim and the person who was in bed with them.
Yes, I agree with you. That's the first thing I thought. It seems like they're very familiar. Now there was some DNA, but obviously back in 1907 we didn't have DNA. But there was blood discovered in the hand basin, so like in the sink. It was actually full. The water was full up and it was all bloody. So somebody had gone and washed their hands in the sink. There was also a petticoat that they believe might have been used for the assailant to wipe their hands or wipe the knife, or there was no fingerprints on it, but there was this petticoat that didn't have as much saturated blood as anywhere else. So that was what they kind of thought, perhaps. There was also a partially burnt letter found in the grate. So that's interesting. And it makes me wonder, the state of the apartment, the state of the flat there, it makes me think that this person was looking for something and that they only stole these little things just to make it look like a burglary or, like a robbery or something. Because there was stuff left over that was of value that if someone was robbing them, they could have taken. But they didn't. So that makes me think, okay, we'll just mess the place up a bit, or we're looking for something specific and then we'll just take a few things to make it look like we've robbed her.
Yeah, it wasn't a robbery, obviously.
No, I don't think
so.
Because
when it's a botched robbery, you don't see that sort of killing. You don't see that sort of anger or violence towards them.
Exactly. And thinking that person obviously knew her, then so the doctor made an examination of the body for seeing whether there was anything sexual that had happened. I mean, obviously that was her job. He said there was a quantity of mucus, but they did do 5 microscope examinations and they couldn't find any sperm or anything like that. So I mean, we're talking about a very long time ago as well. So it's, they obviously weren't as advanced as we are now, because if we could do this now, we probably would
Yeah.
get a completely different result. Now,
Oh, yeah.
he also said that Emily had suffered from syphilis, but it wasn't recent. He said there had been a few skin marks, but they might have been 12 months or so since she had actually had the disease. He also noticed that she had a roll of curlers in the front of her hair and pins in the front of her hair. So she still had those curling pins in that the landlady remembers seeing her wearing at 8 p.m. that night. So
Okay.
still has those in. So she also had some combs in her hair. It doesn't say what sort of combs they are. And one of the combs was lying on the pillow as though it had fallen out of her hair when she was laid down. So,
Okay. Now, I don't know how sex workers got their clients in 1907, but I'm assuming they're not posting ads on the internet, right?
no.
And so this was interesting. She's in hair curlers at 8
Yeah.
p.m., right?
Yeah.
So which means she's not out on the streets or whatever.
But she does go out.
She does go out.
Yes. She does leave and go out.
With the hair curlers then.
Well, it sounds like it. I don't really know the etiquette of curlers and hair curlers and stuff. So I'm not sure whether that was something she would have in to pin her curls in, or, I don't know. I'm not sure. Well, that did confuse me too.
This doesn't seem like none of this seems like normal activities for someone who was, in quotation, working,
I agree.
This seems more casual.
Yes.
This seems like it's more someone that she knew, she was dating, she was comfortable with.
Yeah. I thought exactly the same thing.
This isn't just some guy that she meets on the streets.
No.
And she's like, all right, come back, let's have supper, and we'll do what we need to do, and then we're going to have a nice little...
You pay me, yeah.
A wee little cuddle at the end of the night.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I thought exactly the same thing. This sounds to me more like a date, or
a date, like a legitimate date, like
a date with somebody you already know, not like a first date.
Someone that you're interested in.
Yeah.
Someone that you're comfortable with. Yeah.
Someone that you've met before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the first police suspect obviously was going to be Bert, because he was the husband. He had the perfect motive. He was jealous. He found out, what she was doing when he was away. So she was killed with knives. So, I mean, he's a skilled knifeman. He uses knives for his job. So straight away, obviously, he was the suspect, but he was cleared. His alibi was watertight. He was in Sheffield. He was working, and there were plenty of people to corroborate his story as to where he was.
And how far is Sheffield away?
It's quite a way away.
Okay, so
not enough time for him to get back. No, definitely not. And also the landlady, he comes back as well, and the landlady corroborates the story that he came back at the same time as he always came back. So he was cleared. It was all good. Now, Emily had been with a lot of different men, obviously due to her work. Now, suspicion fell on another cook, a guy called Roberts. He admitted to sleeping with Emily on 3 previous occasions, but on the night of the murder, he said he was back at his house, and this was testified to by his very good friend and his landlady as well. So it was 2 witnesses to say where he was, so that's fine. Now, there was a guy called Crabtree who was a petty criminal that she knew. I mean, obviously within her work, she would meet lots of criminals, lots of people in underworld, because she was doing a job that wasn't frowned upon, but it wasn't something that you would tell everybody you do for a living, because it's not the best of work. Now, he says that there was a dark, mysterious and malicious guy called Scotty. Now, this Scotty's name has never been uncovered. He was said to have threatened Emily, and this Crabtree testified that he had also been intimidated by this Scotty, who was wielding a cutthroat razor, and he hated Emily for whatever damage she had done to himself and his family. But he didn't actually say what he had done. The thing is, can you believe this Crabtree guy? I mean, he's a crook and a criminal.
Yeah.
He's a liar by trade. Are you going to believe him?
No, not in this case.
No.
Because it doesn't sound like someone that, the story doesn't match up to what we know about that evening.
That's right. Now, Crabtree also mentioned a guy called Scotch Bob. Now, this Scotch Bob had been often seen with Emily. Now, his real name was Robert Mackey, but he was investigated and he had an alibi for the time of the murder, and he was actually in Scotland. So,
Does
he,
does he have his own true crime podcast?
yeah, maybe it might be quite twisted, his podcast. I'm going to check that and see whether that is. I'm going to see whether that's Scottish Bob's like ancestor or something. Think of it like that. So on the Friday before the murder, a man was seen in the Rising Sun pub talking to Emily. Now, it was said that she had been intimate with him for some months before she was killed, but she
Okay.
seemed to be a little bit frightened of him. Witnesses have said that she was a bit frightened. Now, this guy was called Robert Wood. He was a commercial artist and a craftsman in glassware. He was employed by a firm in Gray's Inn Road. Now, he was really good character, no shoddy dealings, no dodgy stuff going on. His friends and his family's colleagues all said that he was a kind, courteous man. He had met Emily in the Rising Sun on the Friday before she was killed. Now, he lived within a stone's throw of the Rising Sun pub, but he said that he didn't know Emily lived nearly opposite him. Now, on the Friday night, Emily had asked him for a penny for the gramophone, which he gave her. He then paid for some drinks, and then they sat and chatted. Now, a boy came in offering postcards for sale, and he said they were quite common postcards. And actually, he produced some of his own postcards and showed Emily, and Emily really liked them and chose one of them. But she asked him, could he post it to her? Could she have it posted? So he said, yes, no problem. So she says, could you send it to me and write something pleasing on it? He said he signed the card Alice at her request because she didn't want Bert to be suspicious.
Yeah.
So he signed this card Alice. Now, he said he saw her again the following night in Great College Street as he was on his way to Camden Road. He said he saw her again on the Monday night in the Rising Sun. There were other people there and he had a sketchbook and that she was looking through his sketchbook. He said that she was quite intelligent, which appealed to him. And about 11 o'clock, he left the pub. He said that she then met him again on the Saturday and said to him, look, you haven't sent me that postcard yet. So on the Sunday night, he then used the post box in Museum Street and sent her the postcard. Now, on the Tuesday night, he said he wasn't in the Rising Sun at all. He was on his way to the Red Lion Street to get some ink for a pen. And then he said after that, they went to the public library, him and his brother. He met his brother, went to the barber's. Then they went home, had some supper, and then they went to Frederick Street to see their father. Now, their father was quite ill. And Robert didn't make it known that he liked to frequent pubs because pubs were full of rough people and he didn't want his dad to know that. He was poorly, didn't want to upset his dad. So he didn't tell him where he went. Now, he didn't go out again after that. Now, the following evening was the 11th of September. And he said he was in the Eagle pub with Emily, who he had seen on Camden Road. A friend of his came in. He introduced her to him as his merry girlfriend. He said he only knew her as Phyllis. He didn't know her as Emily, but he didn't mention her name to his friend. He said he couldn't say exactly how Emily was dressed that night, but she looked very neat and he didn't notice whether or not her hair was in curling pins. He said that he left her in the Eagle Public House at 11 o'clock and walked straight home, to which case he got home between 11:30 and 12. He said he didn't go out again that night. He was at work all day Thursday. And then on the Friday, somebody told him that there was a woman that had been killed. He said he'd never been to 29 St Paul's Road. He said that when he read the announcement in the newspaper that a woman had been murdered and the victim was a young woman of 23, who in the paper was called Mrs. Shaw, he didn't put two and two together that was Emily, or Phyllis as he knew her. He said it didn't strike him that it was even the same person and the address that he had sent the postcard to. Then when he saw the word Phyllis in inverted commas in the newspaper, he then started to put things together and he panicked because one, he was seen with her the night she was murdered. Two, he's handwritten a postcard and sent it to her. So he's now starting to think this is looking bad for me. So being stupid as he is, he asks a former lover, a prostitute called Ruby, to provide him with a false alibi.
Oh, no.
So why? I don't know. Why he just didn't stick to the actual story that how it actually happened, because there's nothing nefarious about that. He was with his brother and then went home to his dad. So I don't really understand what the problem was. Why didn't he just get his dad to give him an alibi? I mean, eventually his dad did give an alibi, which surpassed Ruby's alibi, but it made him look like a liar because he
is.
Because he's just pretended he didn't know her for more than a couple of days. And, so Robert Wood was then put on trial for Emily's murder. Okay. Now, as I said to you earlier, many of Emily's friends were prostitutes or pimps, brothel keepers, thieves, general people of not good reputation. The prosecution made a massive deal out of Robert Wood's statement that he had known Emily for no longer than a couple of days. So obviously, so either they've painted it that either he's a liar or those witnesses just wanted to blacken his name. When you look at it like that in front of a jury, what's more likely? Mm-hmm. These guys are trying to blacken the name of this good, upstanding member of the community for no apparent reason, or he's lying. Which he is lying.
He's lying. Yeah.
So, he didn't do himself any favors at all. So he does explain that he was anxious about being associated with her. So that's why he asked his former girlfriend, the prostitute, for an alibi. He's just digging himself into more and more holes, this guy. So he asked her to say that she was with him from 6:30 till 10:30 that night. He went to see her on Sunday, 29th of September, the day after he had seen the reproduction postcard in the paper. So he knows his handwritten postcard is now in the paper. And Ruby does confirm that, yes, it looks like his handwriting. So she's thrown him right under the bus as well. So he then said he couldn't conceal it any longer, the fact that he was friends with Emily, and he made this arrangement with Ruby so that she could say she was with him because he was thinking he was going to be in big trouble. So he was actually arrested on the 4th of October. And eventually, through all the trials and tribulations, it comes to the fact that his statement was actually a mix between the truth and the statement that he concocted with this Ruby.
Oh my God.
So this poor guy he's just dug himself a lot of holes.
Yeah.
Now the judge was an old-fashioned Victorian guy called Sir William, who was then in his 70s. He had very, very clear views about prostitutes and people who use prostitutes.
Oh.
He was not very favourable of that kind of thing. However, are you ready for this? The judge appeared to be instructing the jury to convict him. Then suddenly he just stated that he didn't feel that the prosecution had done a good enough job and it was their duty to acquit the defendant. And within 15 minutes, the jury came out not guilty.
Shut up.
Seriously. Yeah, seriously.
What is going on with Sir William?
I know. And apparently the whole courtroom were up in surprised because judges didn't ever say stuff like that. But he basically turned to the jury and said, look, the prosecution's job hasn't been done properly. You've got to acquit this guy. And they did.
No.
So this case actually became a landmark in legal history, in English lit history, because it was the first time since the passing of the Criminal Justice Bill of 1905 that an accused man in a murder trial was able to give evidence on his own behalf, because he actually gave evidence himself and he was cross-examined in the dock.
But how can you trust any of the evidence he gave when he's already a known liar?
I know, exactly. He's already said that he was lying, but he was acquitted. And after he was acquitted, he went on to lead a very respectful life, family, kids, and he died in 1966.
Oh
and
God.
Emily's case remains unsolved to this day. But the interesting thing about this is, I don't think he did. No, I don't think he did. I don't think it was him.
Oh, come on.
I think he was innocent. I don't think it was him. I think she met up with somebody else. And I think there's somebody else. She took somebody else back. You're not telling me that he was the only person she regularly saw. No. I think she took somebody else back and they killed her. But do you want to hear something really cool? If you go onto oldbaileyonline.org, you can get the full trial transcript of this whole case, everything, word for word. The whole trial. And
No.
and you can see, hang on, I'm going to just send it to you so you can actually have a look. And you can see the original booklet. You can see everything, the original booklet of it. I've spent ages looking through this. It's fascinating. I'm sure you can probably look up loads of other stuff as well, but it actually tells you in the speak, in exact words from 1907, it tells you, it starts off with her brother talking about his sister, how he found out she died. Then it goes into Bert's testimony, and
Yeah.
he explains exactly what happened in his own words. The landlady, the doctor, everything.
No way.
Absolutely everything is in here, and you can actually see the original documents. They've actually scanned the original documents, and it goes through the whole trial. I mean, I probably could have done a 4-part story on this one.
We could do a whole reenactment on the trial.
We could, yeah, we could. It's absolutely fascinating. Now, also, I can't let this go without telling you. At one point, this murder was actually thought to have been one of Jack the Ripper's victims.
Wait, in 1907?
Apparently, Jack the Ripper, if you Google it, actually you can see the correlation. But I mean, I don't really know how they did it or why they did it. But Jack the Ripper, I mean, what he used to do to his victims is nothing like. I mean, he used to literally like rip them open, and take all their guts out and stuff. But with this one, I don't think it had anything to do with Jack the Ripper, but it has been linked to Jack the Ripper, and I think
so this would have been like 20 some years after Jack the Ripper started murders. I think. I mean, I guess it's possible depending on how old he was, but I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah. And I mean, there's lots of different things about this online. There's a book that's been written by a latter day judge who's actually looked back on this. And this guy is now a retired judge. And he thought he would go and look at some cold cases. And he started looking through the archives and came across this one and started investigating it as he would have done nowadays. So that was really interesting. There's a whole book about, I think, the Postcard Murders on Amazon. You can pick the book up and read it. That's really interesting as well. I had a look through that one. There's loads of stuff on this. There's a guy that did portraits, something Sinclair, I think he was called, William Sinclair, something like that. And he did these because obviously they didn't have cameras and stuff then, like you do now. He did pictures, and it's not known as to whether he had access to the crime scene or whether he just read about it and drew these pictures from what he read in the papers. Because it was, I mean, they were quite vivid with their explanations back then. I mean, they didn't have any, like, there was nothing to stop them from writing exactly what they wanted to write. So they do get a bit gruesome and a bit graphic in their newspapers back then. But they
of course.
They literally do go through. Yeah, I mean, the website, the Old Bailey online website, is absolutely fascinating. It's literally everything you could want to know.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm looking at it right now. It's crazy.
It is. I mean, it tells you absolutely everything in that you need to know. I mean, I love the fact that you could see the original documents, and I didn't know that this website existed. And so now I'm going to go back and see what other cases there are on this website, because it's so interesting, it's so in depth.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's oldbaileyonline.org if you want to have a look. You can have a look and see. And I don't mind if you want me to post you the link in Instagram or something. I can do that too.
Yeah, do that. That'd be amazing. Yeah.
So you can go on and have a look. But yeah, it's Robert William Thomas George Cavers Wood, killing 10th of December 1907. Verdict: not guilty.
Let's see. He then put a postcard together. Formed an opinion that she. Letter was written on three ties. In the back was blank. One part stood out very plainly by myself. It said, "Dear Phyllis, will you meet me at the Eagle tonight, 8:30, Wednesday, Camden Town?" Yeah. And beside Bert. Yeah, that's so crazy.
I know. Signed Bert, which is her husband.
Yeah.
So did Bert do it? No.
Nah.
No, I don't think Bert did it.
It's amazing. Yeah, this is really interesting.
It's cool, isn't it? I knew you'd like it.
It is.
It's a really interesting case. And all the way back from 1907 and still unsolved.
Very interesting.
But I don't think Robert did it.
I think he did.
Do you? No, I'm convinced he didn't. Good old Rob.
Oh, good. Yeah, good old Rob.
Good old Rob.
Good old Rob.
Well, I'm on Team Rob. I don't think he did it. I think it just is coincidental that he, I mean, no one said when he met his brother didn't say he was covered in blood. Surely he would have been covered in blood. That's a horrific injury. And how did he get out of the house? Everything was locked. So how did he get out?
A window. I don't know.
I think he would have been seen.
Someone had to get out. It's not like she did it herself. So someone got out. So why couldn't it have been him to get out?
I don't think it was him. I don't know why. I just don't. It's too easy. It's too easy to be him. Well, yeah. There's too many suspects to definitively rule that he was the killer. There's too many. Yep. You can't say 100% it was definitely him.
Fine. But he's also a liar. So
fine. Okay, fine. So that's your case for this week.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. It's a bit different. I do like the old cases.
And I think we're going to continue on with our old cases.
Okay.
With this week's Dumb Criminal.
Hey, dum head. You's a real jackass.
Just a quick note. We don't plagiarize the captain's voice. He lends it willingly for our show. We have had people message him and say, oh, "Did you know that Crimepedia? They're using your voice." And he's like,
"Stole your voice."
Yes, because I did it for them. It was a bit of fun, It wasn't that they stole it. But thanks and all.
That is insane. That's insane.
So what have you got for us this week?
Okay, so this case, this dumb criminal is going to be a little different.
Okay.
Because the dumb criminal is not going to be something that you're going to expect. Okay.
Okay.
So let me start off that this case happened in 804 AD.
Oh, this is a really old case. Okay.
This is a really old case.
Possibly our oldest.
Absolutely our oldest. Now, I found this interesting. So while I was in England for CrimeCon UK, before I went down to London, I was visiting with my sister and brother-in-law and my niece's nephew up in northern England, Manchester area.
Okay.
We spent a day in Chester.
Okay.
Now, if you're familiar with Chester, it's a very old city. There's, a lot of, they still have the city walls up. There's the Roman amphitheater, Roman gardens, yada, yada, yada. The other, another thing that is famous for is its race course, which I believe is like the fourth oldest race course in all of England. Right? Now, in the middle of the race course, or maybe not the middle of the race course, but off one of the front stretch of the race course, when we walked past it, we noticed that there was like a little, I don't know what you'd call it.
Statue?
I wouldn't call it like a statue.
Yeah.
It was like a statue. And so we were really curious about that. And we found out there's actually a very, very interesting story behind it. Now, the race course, which is also known as the Rudai, I believe is how it's pronounced, is located in Chester, England. Okay. Now, right off the race course, there is a cross which marks a burial site.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Now, this burial site was actually the burial site of a statue of the Virgin Mary.
Okay.
So you're probably wondering why have they
buried a statue?
Why did they exactly, right? Well, back in 804, there was a Christian temple at a place called Harden, which was located in the time in the Kingdom of North Wales. Now, in this Christian temple, there was an image of the Virgin Mary that was on a very large cross.
Uh-huh.
And in the hands of the image, there was something called the Holy Rood.
Right.
Now, at the time, there was a governor nobleman and governor of Harden Castle, and his wife was the Lady Trost. It's Trawst.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so she went to this Christian temple to pray. Now, while she was praying, this statue of Mary fell down upon her head and killed her.
Oh my God, I thought he was going to say like the Virgin Mary statue reached down and whacked her on the head with the truss in her head.
No.
Okay, so it just fell on
and killed her.
Oh God.
Now, there was a huge uproar about this, and it was concluded at the time and resolved upon that the Virgin Mary had murdered Lady Trost.
Oh my God. Not that it was a bit of shoddy workmanship and she fell over.
Exactly. Because of this, a jury was summoned.
Oh my God.
And this actually went to trial.
You're joking.
No. So a trial was called, and the Virgin Mary was found guilty of murdering Lady Trost.
Oh my God.
Okay. And so since this is the Virgin Mary and you couldn't burn her at the stake,
smash her up,
or smash her up or hang her, they decided that the only thing that they could possibly do would be to bury her and then give her the proper burial and mark it. So after she was found guilty of murder, the statue of the Virgin Mary was buried at the location of the racecourse now, and this cross was buried to basically mark the place where the Virgin Mary was buried.
That's so stupid. Why didn't they just move her to a more stable, stable base where she wouldn't fall over?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Now this is interesting. So there was a jury of 12 men.
That's ridiculous.
And if this actually occurred, of course, this would be the first recorded case of a jury being used in a court.
Oh my God. And it's for a statue. Not even a living. That is mad.
Yeah.
That's brilliant, but mad. That's a great dumb criminal. That's really good.
So the statue of Virgin Mary, you are a dumb criminal, apparently.
Yeah, obviously. Falling off your base and killing the lady. That's crazy. Yeah, so
apparently this governor was so upset with the Virgin Mary killing his wife that he demanded this trial to occur, and they found it guilty.
Well, of course they're going to find her guilty, because what else are they going to do? They can't. I know she's innocent. She didn't kill her. She obviously did. What I want to know is what was that woman doing to the statue for it to fall over and squash her? She was probably carving her name in the bottom of it or something. Lady, whatever was here.
Lady Trout.
And it fell over on her head. It's her own fault.
Oh, that's
crazy.
Funny.
Thank you very much. So that is this week's case. That's this week's Dumb Criminal. We will be back next week with another case for you. And if you're interested in joining our Patreon, where you get lots more nonsense, another episode every week of us just talking absolute nonsense, not necessarily crime related. It might just be dinner or something else that we're talking about. Visit patreon.com/crimepedia and you will be able to subscribe to that for as little as, I don't know, the price of a cup of tea.
Oh, yeah, easily.
And then you get all sorts of extra content and nonsense. And you'll also get our Case Closed episodes, which we've got one coming up for you this week, which is exciting.
We do.
So we will be back next week with another case. So for now, be nice.
And bye.